the East Arabian shore, which was arid and dry with no fresh water and thus few people, the West African shore had plenty of fresh water and had larger populations. What's more, the West Coast had easily accessible ports. We know their names. Here they are. The ports along them are Asab, Agilis, continue on Suakin, Berenice, and Safaga. Look at the dates. They all predate Islam. Notice they're all 1 day's boat ride apart. So they would go in every night to shelter. These have been around since the 3rd century BC. On the Red Sea side, on the Arabian side of the Red Sea, the only port that we know of is called Yanbu, which supported Yathrib. So what about Jeddah, which supports Mecca? Muslims have always asked me, well then, did Jeddah exist also? Dr. John Halting, who is the world authority on Jeddah, wrote his book on it. And if you look at his book, he says Jeddah did not exist until the 8th century AD. It was created because Mecca was created. Mecca had no water, therefore it needed provisions. That's why they created Jeddah. Therefore, since there was none, let's get rid of Jeddah and Mecca. Boom, they go off the screen. Without Jeddah, without Mecca, what happens to Islam? A big red X. Well then, what about the civilizations? Maybe they knew about this place. Let's ask, and Dr. Patricia Koran went around, she asked this question. If Mecca was the oldest city in the history of mankind, someone somewhere should have heard of it. So she went and she looked at all the empires to see what they said. Now remember, she reads and writes 15 languages. So she read everything in its original tongue. The Assyrians, she found nothing about Mecca. The Babylonians, they knew nothing about Mecca. The Roman Empire knew nothing about Mecca. Neither did the Persians. What about those closer to it? Much closer, like the Nabateans. They knew nothing about Mecca. And the Sabaeans knew nothing, and neither did the Himyarites, or the Azdis, or the Kindas, or the Kedarites. None of these people, including the Nubians right across the Red Sea, none of them had heard of Mecca. Not one word. All the way up until the 8th century. What does that say about Mecca to you folks? If it is the center of history, if it's the oldest city in history, if it's where Abraham lived, if all the trade now, north, south, east, west is going through it, why had no one heard of it? Well, what about the other cities that were in that area? Let's ask and see if they are, because there are a lot of cities in that area, or towns, not really cities, they're hamlets. And let's see if history knows about them. Let's look at Najran, which is about 400 miles south of it, a small little town. But Strabo talks about it, Pliny the Elder talks about it, Ptolemy talks about it, Aretas, all of it, it's well known. What about Sana and Taif and Yathrib and Khaybar that are right near Mecca? Yes, they're well known. The Greeks talk about it from the 6th century BC, they refer to these places. Mamre. Pliny has a whole book written on the history of it. Petra, Jukowski has written an entire book on the history of Petra. Maghrib, where Muhammad Mariktan has written another history on it. Why are all these insignificant towns referred to, but not one of them referred to Mecca? I'll tell you why. To know why, take a look at a map and you'll see why. Look at those 4 maps. Those are 4 topographical pictures of Arabia. And what do you notice about Mecca and Medina? Well, the central part, where Medina and Mecca are, is the desert, right? Where there's the desert, there's no water. Where there's no water, there's no food. Where there's no food, there's no people. Where there's no people, there's no towns. Where there's no towns, there's no cities. Where there's no cities, there's no civilization. Where there is no civilization, there is no history. It's as simple as that. How long did it take me to say that? 10 seconds. And you can do the same. You have to have water, folks. If there's no water, there's no history. That's why it was called Patria Deserta by the Romans. It's always been a desert. That's why none of the prophets could have come there. Nobody has ever heard of it. Just like Mars, without water, there's no point even going there. But we have to go there. Let's go to the Hajj. Because the Hajj is where you need to find out. If the Hajj has been there from the very beginning, then it should be also archaic. It should be the center of history. Am I correct? When you go to the Hajj, and those of you who can't go because you're not Muslims, but you go and you circumambulate that square building called the Kaaba 7 times. Why do you circumambulate 7 times going counterclockwise? Good question. I'm going to tell you. To do that, you need to go to Petra. Petra also has a Kaaba that you circumambulate 7 times going counterclockwise. Why does it have a Kaaba? Well, you need to go to this city. Do you recognize it? Jerusalem. You've got to go back to Jerusalem. That also have a Kaaba. Remember, Kaaba means square in Arabic. It also means square in Hebrew. And the Kaaba in Hebrew was the Holy of Holies. And the Jews would circumambulate it 7 times going counterclockwise because of Jericho. God told them to do it 7 times, going counterclockwise. They still did it as a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Therefore, the Kaaba that was in Mecca comes from Jerusalem. It gets better than that. After they circumambulate 7 times, they then run back and forth between Safa and Marwa, the 2 mountains that are there. Take a look. Do those look like mountains to you? They're only about 20 feet high. You can climb on them as kids. Those are not mountains. Those are rocks. They're called Marwa and Safa, and the Muslims run back and forth 7 times. Why? Because Hagar is in the desert. She's thrown out of Mecca by Abraham, who's living in Mecca. She runs out of water. She needs to find water for Ishmael. She runs back and forth 7 times between 2 mountains. Folks, those don't look like mountains to me. In fact, hold on a minute. They're only 100 feet away from the Kaaba, which is in the center of Mecca. If she's out in the desert and she can't find water, then what is she only doing 100 feet away? Why doesn't she just knock on any door and get some water from the neighbors? Can you see there's a problem here, folks? This is not the original Marwa and the original Safa. This is nothing more than a facsimile. This is nothing more than when you go to Las Vegas, you'll see an Eiffel Tower there, right? That's not the original Eiffel Tower. You'll see a pyramid there. That's not the original pyramid. They're nothing more than facsimiles. That's what you're looking at. So where is the original Marwa and Safa? No, some people think it's in Petra. You need to go to Jerusalem. Go to Mount Moriah, where the Temple Mount is. What is the name for Moriah in Arabic? Marwa. You go down to the Kidron Valley and go back up to Mount Scopus. That's what the pilgrims all did. And what is the name of Mount Scopus in Arabic? Safa. So the original Marwa, the original Safa are in Jerusalem. God bless the Muslims. All they did was plagiarize. Everything is plagiarized in Islam. When you look at the Hajj, you can see that the Kaaba is plagiarized. You can see that the Safa and Marwa are plagiarized. You can see that the Hill of Arafat, I don't have time to get into it, that's plagiarized. You can see the Jamarats where they throw 49 stones. Why 49? Because it's a multiplication of 7, which is the holy number in Judaism. They just plagiarized from the Christians. You look at the Zamzam well, that is the same thing, the same word that is used for the well there in Siloam, the pool of Siloam in Jerusalem. And then we get to the black stone. Thank God this is not plagiarized. What in the world is the black stone doing there? On the eastern corner of the Kaaba. Every Muslim, as they circumambulate, they kiss the stone so that they get their sins forgiven. Who can forgive sins but God? This is idolatry, folks. And it's at the very seat of Islam. The very center of Islam is based on idolatry. If Muslims say God is one, then what's that stone doing there? That does not come from Jerusalem. You understand that? And I'm not going to go into it because I see I'm running out of time. I need to keep going. Look and go up on Fander Films. We got all of it up there. We're now unpacking all of this material so you can see it. So can you see? No one could find Mecca placed in the Quran. Koran could pretty much debunk the trade route theory. Gibson debunked the Qiblas. Koran also debunked. She not only debunked that, but she also debunked the maps. And then we debunked the trade route going through the Red Sea. And then, of course, the 5 stages of the Hajj. Though Mecca has existed since Adam and Eve in Surah chapter 7, verse 24, there is no evidence of it anywhere until 741. And everything we now find in Mecca, we could find previously in Petra, and now even earlier in Jerusalem. You ready for Muhammad? What do we know about Muhammad? Well, last and greatest prophet according to Islam, modeled Islam for the world, received the Quran, has a final revelation. Everything we know about him, we can find in the Sirah ibn Sham, but as I now said, it looks like that comes from a German scholar named Wustenfeld. And the Hadith of Bukhari, we don't have anything from al-Bukhari until the 11th century. And the 8 of his 9 volumes don't appear to the 16th century. The same problem we're having with the Quran, we'll get to that in just a bit. Now, is he referred to in the 7th century in the time period he supposed lives? If he did exist, someone should have known about him, right? Or said something about him. So what we need to do, let's start with the coins. Because the coins, if there's any caliph coming to power, the first thing a caliph will do, or a king will do, will mint coins with his name on it, his image on it, and also what denomination he belongs to, what religion he belongs to, and the date of the coin, right? That's what they all do in those ancient days, because they didn't have newspapers, they didn't have TV, they didn't have radio. They knew that everybody would touch points. So let's see where the mints are. According to Islam, everything that the caliphs did was in Medina, which is in the south there in Hijaz. But when you look at the mints, notice where all the mints are. The mints are all up there in Syria, Jordan, and Israel today. Those are the western mints. What about the ones in the east? They're all in what is today Iran and Iraq. There are no mints whatsoever where they're supposed to be. All the coins were minted too far north. Did I not say that earlier? Too far north? What's interesting is, when you look at the coins themselves, the conclusion is none of these mints were in the Hijaz. Instead, they were too far north, possibly because the Hijaz was a desert with no water, and where there is no water, you know the rest of the story. Let's then look at the coins, because the coins were being minted by people who were living at that time, and they were leaders. Notice that when you look at the mints, look at the coins from the 7th century, 620, 630, 640, 650, up until 661, you notice that almost all the coins are Christian. Look at the crosses on them. That's what you do. You put the cross in if you're a Christian. We can't find any coins whatsoever in the early 7th century that has anything to do with Islam, anything to do with Muhammad, anything to do with the Koran, or anything to do with Mecca. Not at all. So when we get to Mu'awiyah, who is the first caliph according to the Islam from the Umayyad dynasty, Mu'awiyah, the first caliph, look at his coins. He's supposed to be a good Muslim, right? But take a look. What does he have above his head? A cross. Take a look at the two that are on the right there. Look at the two bottom ones there. There's Mu'awiyah. He has a cross above his head. He's holding a cross in his hand. On the back side of the coin is the word Muhammad, which is Muhammad. That's the first reference to Muhammad anywhere, and that's 663. Possibly, is he Muhammad? No. What does Muhammad mean in Arabic? The praised one. So who's the praised one? Well, if he's holding a cross and he's got a cross, who do you think the praised one is? What's his name? Jesus. Thank you. Let's prove that. So let's go to an inscription that Mu'awiyah put down. This is an inscription by Mu'awiyah. There's his name. And he refers to himself as the servant of God, commander of the believers. And what does he have right there in the top left? A cross. So who is he a servant of God for? And what believers? Christians. He was a Christian, folks. All the coins say so. They don't lie. This is the 7th century. He rules up until 680, and then you have Abd al-Malik come to power in 685. Abd al-Malik is the one that we need to look at, because he introduces new coins that introduce the Shahada. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is only one God but God. Muhammad is nothing more than the servant of God. But remember, Muhammad is a title. It means the praised one, right? So what does he do? Because of he puts that up there, Justinian II goes to war with him. He's the Byzantine emperor. Abd al-Malik wins the battle, and he puts up this coin with himself as victorious. I didn't know you could put up images of yourself on your coins. Not if you're a Muslim. So obviously he's not a Muslim. Obviously this Muhammad that's there has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with Jesus. Why? Just look at the Dome of the Rock that he built. Look at the inscriptions on the Dome of the Rock that he built in 691. When you look at the inscriptions, you will see they're all attacking the divinity of Jesus, his Christology, the Trinity, and his sonship. All of these inscriptions, saying not three, for God is one and he has no son. For truly, God does not beget nor is he begotten. One is in chapter 4, verse 171 of the Quran. The other is in chapter 112. These are all attacking Jesus Christ. And then you get, for truly, there is only one God but God, and the praised one. So who's the praised one? It's all about Jesus, right? So the praised one is nothing more than the messenger of God. He was an anti-Trinitarian Christian, attacking the Byzantine Christianity. Why? Because they're his greatest threat as the other superpower of his day. He then introduces this coin. This is my coin. I bought it now. And all of it is attacking Jesus Christ. Folks, this is the beginning of what later became Islam. All started by this man, and it was all to confront Jesus Christ. It's all against our Lord. The coins don't lie. If you want to go to the inscriptions that find the exact same thing. They're found in the north, they're found in the south. None of them are found in the middle. Why do you think they're not found in the middle? There's no water. There you go. Boy, you learn fast. Ilka-Lindstad is the one who dated he was the one that looked at the rock inscriptions, and he looked at the 100-year period between 640 and 740, and he noticed that all these inscriptions, which are written in Arabic, they do have formula, but it's nothing to do with Islam. It's pious formula, which has much more to do with Christianity. It's not till 690 to 710 that the Prophet Muhammad is introduced into these inscriptions. Muslim rites such as pilgrimages, prayers, and fasts are introduced by about 720, and Muhammad as a man and the people called Muslims and the religion called Islam are not introduced until 730. That's over 100 years after Muhammad, if Muhammad even existed. It was only in the 730s onwards that there is evidence of popular devotion to a man named Muhammad as a prophet and messenger, which makes the Islamic traditions incredibly awkward. There is a 100-year silence prior to this that indicates that Islam did not exist as a distinct religion until long after the time of Muhammad, which cast doubt on whether he had any part in starting Islam. I'm going to go through these real quickly. I just want to show you, what about the references to Muhammad in the 7th century? There are major references. There are 4 of them. Only the 4 references. Take a look at every one of these references to Muhammad in outside sources. Take a look. He is known as the Tayyaye de Muhammad. Muhammad the Tayyaye. Who are the Tayyaye? They were Lahmids. They lived in Iraq. So obviously the praised one is from Iraq. Look where Iraq is on a map. It's over 600 to 1,000 miles further north. What about in 636, the Arabs of Muhammad, which is in Yarmouk. Where is Yarmouk? It's north of Israel. So obviously this is way too far north. Muhammad never went to Israel. I don't remember him ever being to Iraq. 660, Sabaeus talks about the Ishmaelite called Mahmed, who was aligned with 12,000 Israelites. First of all, that's not historical. There were no 12,000 Israelites who were going to war against the Byzantines. That never existed. So obviously this is fraudulent. But nonetheless, look and see where this is. This is way up in Damascus. So that Muhammad, I don't recall Muhammad ever being that far north. And then you have John Bar Benkei in 690 talking about a teacher and leader of the Arabs who obviously was named Muhammad. Who is this referring to? Look and see who the Arabs were. They were all Christians, but they were not Trinitarian Christians at this time. It's really John of Damascus who really identifies and sees for the first time the Muhammad we're starting to come across. And he does refer to it, talks about Muhammad, who comes with his ludicrous doctrines, comes with 4 books. The book called The Cow, which is now Surah 2, the book called Women, which is Surah 4, the book called The Table, which is Surah 5, and the book called The Camel, which is Surah Nothing. There is no camel surah in the Quran. So obviously, whatever John of Damascus is, it's not the Quran we know today. And the Quran is much bigger than just 3 surahs. There's 114 of them in the Quran. So obviously, this means that there was no Quran that early. Every reference to Muhammad in the 7th century places him in Gaza, Jerusalem, Damascus, or Hira, which are all situated too far north and probably refer to another Muhammad, the praised one. Now we get to the Quran, and this is where it really gets delicious. This is the best material, folks. Sit back. If you want to go to the toilet, you can do, but you'll miss everything. So let's go ahead. What do the Muslims claim about the Quran? Number 1, it's uncreated. It's right there in the Quran itself in chapter 85, verse 22. Therefore, it has never had any chance that any human could have any control over it. It was sent down to Muhammad between 610 and 632. That's what they claim. It was completed by Uthman in 652. That's why this book in my hand right here is from Uthman, they say. And then number 4, the Quran is unchanged in the last 1400 years. Not one word, not one letter has changed. Have you heard Muslims say this? Every Muslim says those 4 things. Just memorize those 4 words. Uncreated, sent down, completed, unchanged. That's all you need to know. I'll come back to it. I'm going to shut down those 4, but I'm going to show you something even better about those 4. Hold on. So what do Christians claim about the Bible? Is the Bible uncreated? No, of course it's created. We know who wrote it. We even know the authors. We put their names on most of the books. The Bible was not sent down. It was inspired by God, but not sent down through an angel. Bible was complete, so yes, we would say that was the case. The thing is, we don't have any of the original manuscripts, so we don't know what the complete is. Has it been changed? Yeah, parts of it has. We know where they've been changed. We know even what we even put. We're very transparent. We put in right where the verses that have been added or there have been scribal errors have been taken away. So we know that. We're very clear about that. And we're only talking about 40 verses out of over 6,000 verses. So tonight, I'm not going to shut down uncreated or sent down because I'm not there. I'm going to shut down complete and unchanged, those 2. That's what I want to look at. So what I want to look for is one Quran manuscript from the 7th century that's complete, 114 surahs, that is unchanged. And this is what I've asked Muslims all over the world. I debated over 100 debates that I've done with Muslims, and this is what I always ask. Show me one manuscript of your Quran from the 7th century that's unchanged, just like the Quran I have in my hand here. Where do we go to find out about the Quran? We have to go to Sahih Bukhari. Remember I told him that he died in 870, so he's the one that tells us how the Quran is put together. Now this is what he says. He says, Muhammad died in 632. It had not been written down. It finally got written down in its final form at the time of Uthman in 652, the 3rd Caliph. He then sent 5 copies to 5 different cities, Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. And those then became the canonized Quran for the whole world. In 652. The problem is, almost immediately, another Quran supplants the one in Damascus, written by Ubay ibn Ka'b. It had 116 surahs. That's 2 more than are in the Quran today. Another was written in Baghdad, written by Ibn Masud. It had 110 surahs. That's a 4 less than what is in the Quran today. Another was written by Ibn Musa, 114 surahs. It had so many differences. According to Arthur Jeffer, who's done the work on this, if you just look at those manuscripts and you compare it with the Quran today, there are about 15,000 differences. You've got a problem. So how could there have been one Quran? There were at least 5 Qurans from the 7th century from Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. We cannot find one of them. Now, one of those Qurans exists today. Folks, what are we talking about 1400 years ago? As Christians, we have the Sinaiticus, the Alexandrinus, we have the Vaticanus. These are from the 3rd and 4th century. That's 200 to 300 years before the Quran. Why can we reproduce our entire Bible? We have 365 manuscripts of the New Testament before the 7th century. Why can't they come up with one Quran from the 7th century? That's my question. They are the ones that claim it, not me. Where are these 5 manuscripts? Look at those cities. They've always been controlled by Islam for the last 1400 years. So how could they have lost it? Rather inept, wouldn't you say? So, before we get into the manuscripts, I want to look at the Qira'at. These are the readings. This has probably done the most devastating material that's just come out in the last few years. These are the original manuscripts. Now, I say original means these are the earliest manuscripts. You notice when you read them, you can all read the Arabic. You notice you can't. Why can't you read that? Because in order to be an reader Arabic, you need to have dots and vowels, right? There are no dots and vowels on that. You need that. Why? Because those manuscripts, the Samarkand and the Sana, those ones had 16 letters. But you can't read it today unless you have vowels to help you out, or dots. Today there are 28 letters. So obviously another 12 letters were added. Why? Because of the dots. Now there are 6 letters that don't require dot, like the Aleph, the Kaf, the Lam, the Mim, the Nun, Ha, and the Waw. The other 22 all require dots. What am I talking about? Well, take a look at one smiley face. One smiley face is usually the root of most letters in Arabic. If you put 1 dot above, you have a na. 2 dots above, you have a ta. 3 dots above, you have a tha. 1 dot below, you have a ba. 2 dots below would have a ya. Na, ta, tha, ba, ya. 5 dots were added in the 8th century, not in the 7th century. Now I can read it, but that didn't exist in the 7th century. Not in those manuscripts you just saw. Hold on, what about dialectical differences? You need to have 3 vowels to have dialectical differences. So you need to have a dhamma, which is the u sound. You need to have a kasra, which is the e sound. And you need to have a fatha, which is the a sound. Those were only added in the late 8th century and the early 9th century. So you've got a problem here. Because suddenly you have Abdul Malik who comes to power and he wants to create a Quran because he's now introducing a prophet. A prophet has to have a book. So what do? You have to borrow right, left, and center. But the problem is you're borrowing in Arabic and you don't have any Arabic that has dots and vowels. So you decide to write your Quran with your dots in it and you call it Hafs. You decide to write you're supposed to be a male, but let's say pretend you're male today, and you call it Warsh. And you decide to write your Quran and you put your dots and vowels wherever you want to. You live in Kufa, you live in Cairo, you live in Damascus, and you put your own dots wherever you want to, and you put your dots where you want to. Suddenly we have 4 different Qurans, right? In 4 different cities. Well, that starts to proliferate. Until the 10th century, there were 700 different Qurans. Did you hear me? 700 different Qurans. According to this man who did his doctoral thesis, he's now head of the Islamic department at Harvard University. Shadi Nasa. He guessed and estimates because they're not there today. Now, you've got a problem. All these Qurans, none of them are agreeing. You've got a difficulty. So Ibn Mujahid, a man in the 10th century, was given the responsibility to choose 7. But before we do that, notice, if dots are in different places with different vowels, just with 3 different one of those little smiley faces, you get 19 different words. There's the difficulty. So here's what he did. He was given the responsibility to choose 7. And these are the first 7 he chose. Nafi from Medina, Ibn Kathir from Mecca, Abu Amr from Basra, Ibn Amir from Damascus, Asim from Kufa, Hamza from Kufa, and Al-Iskasai from Kufa. Notice that 3 of them are from Kufa, 1 from Damascus, the other one is from Basra, and the other 2 are from Arabia. Look at the dates. What do you notice about the dates of every one of those? Look at the death dates. Every one of them either died between 736 and 805. That means 8th and 9th century. Did any of these men know Muhammad? Did they even live in the same century as Muhammad? So how could they have come from Muhammad? These are the 7 that every Muslim will swear came from Muhammad. but no one's bothered to look at their dates. I am the one that put the dates up there. You've got to put the dates together, folks. And this is where you're going to shut down every Muslim. They have no idea of these dates. Those are the first 7, but this book is not there. This is Hafs. This is the official book for the whole world today. Memorized by 93% of all Muslims. Hafs an Asim. You see Asim's name up there, number 5? He is a disciple of Asim. So in 1194, 2 disciples were chosen from every one of the 7 to make 14, right? And that was chosen by Al-Shatibi in 1194. Now you have 7 plus 14. How many do you have? 21. Am I correct? I hope my math's right. That still isn't good enough. In the 15th century, in 429, another man named Al-Jazari chose another 9 to culminate with another 21. So now you have 30 different Qurans. No 2 are alike. But you've been told there's only one Quran. Right? And the one that was chosen by Saudi Arabia was the Hafs that you see there. Guess how many differences there are between Hafs and the other 29? 93,000. 93,000. This is the first time you're hearing this, right? I hope you people who are watching, you Muslims who are watching, you're listening to this. This is going to shut down your Quran for you. Who is the one that found this? Hatun Tash, my colleague. She's only 5'2". She's from Turkey. In London, she and I were on the ladder for 3 years there at Speaker's Corner every Sunday. She was the one that found these by accident because she went to Morocco, she went to Yemen, she went to Jordan, and she went into a bookstore and says, show me a Quran. And they said, well, which Quran are you talking about? She said, what do you mean, which Quran? They said, well, we have Qalun here, we have Hafs over here, we have Warsh over here, we have Kisai over here, we have Ibn Kathir. She said, well, give them all to me. So she brought them back to London, showed me them, and I looked at them and I said, oh man, I started laughing. I thought these were all destroyed in 1924. They were in Cairo and thrown into the Nile. Evidently not. There they are. She has found now 26 of them. She brought 26 of them down to Speaker's Corner. We held them up in 2016. We filmed it. It went all over the internet. This shut down the Quran in 2016. See the man that's there on the right, the tall man with the beard? His name is Muhammad Hijab. One of the most popular men on the internet. He has a following about anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million followers. He was there filming us. When he was doing that, he realized there was a problem. He quickly went outside the crowd and he yelled at all the people, come to me. Do not look at what they're showing you. Do not listen to what they're saying. I will explain everything to you. Obviously, he explained it pretty well. Why? Because 4 years later, he was shown these material. I'm not going to go into all of these. You can go into every one of them, but you can see the Hafs on the left, the Warsh on the right. In every case, it's completely different words. Just by changing the vowels, by changing the dots, you not only get different words, you get different meanings. You don't even get different meanings. You get different doctrines, you get different theologies, and you get different practices. It shuts down the Quran from being preserved. Obviously, these are all done by man. There's a problem there. And so he came to this man who's a leading authority there on the right, Yasser Qadi, there in Houston, and he said, I have a problem. I'm going to put my hand out here, and this is a blank piece of paper. Which Quran are you going to write on it? Which is the one that's eternal? Which is the one that was revealed to Muhammad? Tell me, which one of it? Remember, he was the one that told all the Muslims. He was going to explain it to them. Yasser Qadi says, we do not talk about this in public. This is the most difficult problem for Muslim scholars for the last 1,000 years. He said, we have a respect for the Quran. There are certain questions we don't ask. So Muhammad said, well, is that the problem you had when you were at Yale University getting your doctorate on this in 1995? Is that where you had a crisis of faith? He said, no, not crisis of faith, crisis of knowledge. Notice the difference. He said, in the West, the scholars have come leaps and bounds in the last 100 years. And they're looking at you, according to Muhammad Hijab in the East, they're looking at you like the emperor with no clothes. Why? Because your standard narrative has holes in it. What narrative? Standard Islamic narrative. S-I-N. Has holes in it. Well, we know sin has holes in it. But can you see what happened? This was only a 28 long... This was really a question that was happening. It was an interview for 28 minutes. He didn't know we were all watching this. He said,